Okay, so now let's go on to these fundamental contracts. In my opinion, and let me stress that this is my opinion from a business law. I've been doing this for almost 10 years. And from my experience, in my opinion, these are the contracts that every business owner should have. This doesn't mean that if you don't have any of these contracts, that you're not, following Florida law, or you don't have a legitimate business, or your business isn't following some sort of rule. It just means that I believe that these are contracts that you should all have. And I kind of split these up into categories. So you need to have a contract for your product or your service, which could include terms and conditions, which you can put on your website. It could be your service agreements. These could be retainers. These could be invoices. But you just basically, whether you have a product or a service, you need some sort of contract that provides that to your customers. The minor exception that I will tell you is that if you are providing especially if you're providing a product that's very low cost, or a service that is done, it's one and done, and you get paid up front, you may not really need a contract for those. And it's in a sense of a written agreement that's signed, that a lawyer has looked over. But there might be certain aspects in how you provide that service or that product to where you may need contracts, and you may need some sort of terms and conditions for. Second category is contracts for people in your business. So these are employment agreements, your independent contractor agreements, people who are doing virtual VA work or 1099 work for you, and partnership agreements between your business owners. In employment agreements specifically, if you have a business where every person working in a business is a W-2 employee, you may not have an employment agreement now, but just something to think about is for your very most important employees, employment agreements really actually add value to your business in case you want to sell it. Because what it does is it emphasizes that you have a written agreement with somebody who's core to your business, who you can bake in certain provisions in there to emphasize to investors, to bankers, or to a potential seller how tied this person is to your business. Because in any other scenario, if you don't have employment agreements, your W-2 employees, you are able to fire them. They are able to quit at any point in time, but you lose the opportunity to incentivize these employees to stay in the business, or to have opportunities for advancement in your business that you can actually tangibly provide to a potential seller of your business. I don't mean to kind of go off on a tangent with that, but it is something that I do tell clients, especially those who one day want to sell your business, that employment agreements could actually help you. A third category here are contracts for people outside your business. So when I mentioned before about, for people who have products that they're making, you have relationships with people who help you provide that product. So you should have contracts between those vendors. When you're first starting out, you may be signing those contracts with those vendors, but you eventually want to get to a point when your business grows that you're actually getting more power and more control over your supply chain, that you can actually have your vendors sign your contracts. Leases for those of you who are in commercial spaces, and for those of you who are using private lending, you may have contracts involved for those people, or for people who are investing in your business. You definitely want those contracts. When you combine all these contracts together, what you're really doing is showing how you're building a foundation and protecting your business from the unknown. And I do want to emphasize again, these contracts itself, they can be expensive in the short term to actually build out and use, especially if you're using a business attorney. But the long-term payoff is not just that you're helping protect your business against lawsuits in the short term, but you are actually using these to build value. What I will say is a part of our practice is we do help some business owners sell their business, or business owners who are being approached in a business sale, we help do the due diligence. So if we're doing diligence for a potential sale, the thing that the lawyer is going to look at first are the actual contracts that the business is involved in, or that the business has with other third parties. So a business that doesn't have these contracts, you get marks against them when they're going through due diligence when you want to sell. So the worst thing that could happen to you as a business owner is you work so hard to build up something of some value to society, and you're ready to exit the business, or you have an opportunity to exit. And once you start putting pen to paper, and once the parties start getting serious in negotiations, your business ends up getting devalued because you don't have these contracts in place that gives the buyer of your company some sort of security or assurance that if something goes wrong when they take over, that they're going to be protected. So it's just something to think about. Again, you don't have to do all these all at once, but I'm going to assume that you're all going to be successful. So as you grow and as you get more successful, these are things that you want to have locked in place as you continue to grow.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you have a question about the last slide from Anonymous. So here he goes. He says, what about contracts for those of us here in the US looking to hire virtual assistants from the Philippines using one of those agencies there? My understanding is that no laws apply, be it employment, tax, or other, because they are from outside the US. Then any contracts or agreement recommendations for people in this scenario?
Yes. So especially nowadays, given the world is so connected, it's very common for these situations to happen where a business owner in the US is engaging with a company that's in a different country and using those agents. So what I would say that it's not practical for you as a business owner to have a contract with the VA themselves, but you can have a contract with the staffing company in this scenario that employs those VAs. So the contract, you can do it one or two ways. In some scenarios, they may have you sign a contract, but if you want to protect your business, you may want to have them sign a contract to where the company that employs the VA that's out of the country is responsible to your company. Because in reality, if you have to end up suing a VA from another country, more than likely, you're not going to be getting your money back, because that VA, that agent themselves, is probably not going to have the money to pay you. But the company that employs the VA may have those resources. So I, in that scenario, would have contracts that I would give out to those companies. And those contracts can be these independent contractor agreements, because that's what you are engaging in with the company. It could be confidentiality agreements. It can be non-disclosure agreements that the companies sign. And there's different provisions that you can put in there that make the company responsible for the actions of the individual agent. So to me, it's more of a practical way of doing that. What I will say is, if the company that you're using has no presence in the US, so they have no offices and no full-time employees in the US, it's going to be harder to get them into a lawsuit if you have to sue them, but it's not impossible. It is possible to sue companies from another country. So what I would say ultimately is, think about it as a risk. If you want to engage with these companies that are offshore, the risk is, if something goes wrong, you may have a harder path to rectifying the issue. The benefit you're getting from them is most likely the discounted, getting the labor at a cheaper rate. So you have to make a decision, is the risk worth the reward? If it is, then the best way to go about that is to actually have a contract between you and the agency that's actually hiring the VA. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. You also have a question from Jay, and the question is there more value to having an employee contract rather than an employee agreement?
So an employee agreement is it's the same thing as an employee contract. If by agreement, what you're meaning is, if you're meaning by agreement, you're saying, like a wink deal. If you stay with me for more than a year, I'm going to give you this promotion. When you compare that to an actual employment agreement, there's more value to having an agreement, an employment agreement. But what I would advise you is, if you're my client, I would advise you to stay away from the wink agreements, because you could cause issues there. Granted, if issues come about because of wink agreements between employees, there's a lot of ways you can defend it. Employment agreements themselves, the value is, if there's anything that's not in the contract, then you can always argue that's not part of the deal. And anything that's in the contract, it gives you guidance on how you're going about that employment. From a practical standpoint, what I want to emphasize here is, I'm not advising anyone here to, from now on, whenever you hire a W-2 employee, make sure they sign employment contracts. This is very valuable for businesses where you have employees that are central to the business. These are employees that could be sales managers. So where you want to have non-competes. So where basically you're protecting the business in case they leave and they take your business with them. So it's like these type of employees, these employees that will have access to customer data, customer information, and could leave with that information if they leave the company.